All right, so this was me in freshman year. I was at the absolute pinnacle of my fashionability. I was a 250-pound, 6-foot-tall behemoth. In retrospect, I think I looked like a big brown marshmallow. So I was extremely unhappy with the way I looked. So by the end of freshman year, I decided, hey, I'm gonna lose some weight. And I did. By the beginning of sophomore year, I hit a new low, and I lost about 20 pounds. And I was very confident. I was saying, dang, if I continue this for one more year, maybe I'll look like Hrithik Roshan. Now, obviously, I'm no Hrithik Roshan. But as sophomore year continued, I began getting wrapped up in my own work, thinking, hey, who needs gym, diet anyway? And I gained it all back. So once again, I was a 250-pound, 6-foot-tall behemoth who looked like a big brown marshmallow. Now I was wondering, why did this happen to me? What is the nature of change, and how do I apply this to myself? Now, through some introspection, I realized that there are a few certain parts of change. First, we have to look in the philosophy of change. Then we have to go deep into some biochemistry, then pull it back up with some history and economics, and we can find 4 condensed principles. So let's start. Change is nameless, formless, shapeless, amorphous. It is both a fundamental force and a constant of the universe. It has been one of the greatest enigmas of the Enlightenment thinkers of our times. One such thinker was the Buddha. The Buddha was actually an individual of paramount enlightenment, and his principles guided millions to happiness. However, science only cares about absolute objectivity, not some desi guy's hippie principles on happiness. However, as we've seen, science is starting to agree with some of the Buddha's principles. Things fall apart, change happens. We are surrounded by increasing entropy. Now, the second law of thermodynamics states that every reaction will result in a net increase in entropy, or the disorder of the universe. In chemistry, there also exists the principle of spontaneity. If a reaction is spontaneous, it will happen. It can be instantaneous, like electron exchanges, or it can take billions of years, such as radioactive waste. Now, some reactions are not spontaneous. This means that without an applied energy, they will never happen. It's simply a fact. However, these reactions require an input called activation energy, and they're very important, such as cellular respiration. Now, for great changes to occur, there has to be energy investments on multiple stages in the reaction. Most reactions aren't simple, like what your chemistry teacher told you. They take many different steps, and they're extremely complex. This can now be applied to ourselves. Change takes time. As the adage goes, Rome wasn't built in a day. It was built over hundreds of years of trade, conquest, war, and slavery. It was built from a tiny village in a region of Latium to one of the preeminent civilizations of antiquity. It's also true of the United States. In the 1600s, the United States was a sleepy, oligarchic society on the edge of the world. And in a mere 300 years, it transformed itself to the preeminent global power, superpower, where millions believe in their fundamental right to control their own destiny. Change is gradual. Even the economy is simply just a system of bartering. It's built over billions of interactions that occur daily. When compounded over days, weeks, months, years, decades, and centuries, you can see how the economy of the world changes. This influences geopolitics, and it influences every one of our lives. Change is truly just a sum of its parts. So there are 4 major principles here. The universe will always change. Change is inevitable. There are many steps in the reaction of change, and directed change requires consistent inputs of energy. Over the last few months, I've changed. I've dropped about 50 pounds of fat and gained about 10 pounds of muscles. I've increased my academic rigor, I've maintained my passions, and I've changed my perspective on life, and I changed my perspective on myself. Albert Einstein once said, "The world as we created it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." I want to empower you to apply these 4 principles and try to change something in your own life. Thank you.